My name is Clare Mercer. At 25, the stage lights burned hot against my skin, glinting off the polished wood of the podium. The announcer's voice rang out, "Clare Mercer," and scattered applause followed as I walked forward to accept my MBA diploma. I smiled when the photographer told me to, holding the folder up, but my gaze slid toward the section meant for family. Every seat was empty. I shouldn't have been surprised, yet the hollowness still hit, sharp and heavy. Some small part of me had clung to the foolish hope that maybe, just this once, they would show. That maybe excuses would fall away and they'd come sit proudly in my corner. But the vacant row answered with the same silence that had marked every milestone they'd skipped before. Images crowded in. My 16th birthday, Belle whisked away to New York for a dance workshop while I blew out candles on a supermarket cake, alone. My graduation, delayed hugs because my parents were busy chauffeuring Belle to a photo shoot. The scholarship banquet where I sat at a table for one, told it was just a formality and not worth their evening. Belle, 3 years younger, their star, their obsession. Every one of her wishes became a family mission. My ambitions, meanwhile, earned reminders to stay realistic, independent, not to expect anything. Toughen up, Claire, my father always said, like resilience was something you could just put on like a jacket. The dean's handshake pulled me back into the moment. I left the stage with polite applause in my ears, diploma heavy on my lap as I sat back down. All around me, classmates leaned into their families, embraced with flowers, photos, tears. I folded my hands, face neutral, already preparing the answer I'd give when someone inevitably asked, "Was your family here today?" When the ceremony ended, I stepped into the cool spring air outside Lowe Memorial Library, diploma still tucked under my arm. My phone buzzed once, then again. Unknown number. Main area code. I nearly let it go to voicemail, but something in me swiped to answer. "Ms. Mercer?" A steady male voice. "This is Elliot Brandt, attorney for the Lewis estate in Harbor Bay. I'm calling about your grandparents' affairs." My chest tightened. My grandparents, Thomas and Evelyn Lewis. Their names hadn't been spoken to me in months, not since the quiet memorial I'd mostly arranged on my own. As their sole heir, Elliot continued, "You've inherited their property and financial accounts. We'll need to meet soon, but I can tell you the current estate is valued at roughly $2 million. I froze. Laughter and camera shutters echoed around me, but those words, $2 million, seemed to strip the air of all sound. The number itself barely registered. What mattered was this: they had chosen me. Deliberately. Unquestionably. Memories rushed forward. My grandfather in his flannel, showing me how to steady a fence post. My grandmother dusting flour across the counter as we rolled out dough. Their quiet evenings on the porch, books in hand, the ocean murmuring beyond the roses. From high school through their final years, I was the one driving up, mowing lawns, changing light bulbs, sorting mail. They'd asked for little, just companionship and help with the small things. My parents and Belle almost never came, except for holidays staged for photographs. "Ms. Mercer?" Elliot's voice cut back in. "If you can make it to Harbor Bay this week, we'll start the transfer process." "Yes," I replied firmly. "I'll be there." We ended the call. The breeze lifted against me, and I tightened my grip on the diploma. The gift my grandparents left me was staggering, but I knew what came with it. My family would never let this lie quietly once they found out. And I wasn't about to face that day unprepared. 2 days later, I sat in a glass-walled Portland office across from Damon Clay, a trust attorney a former classmate had recommended. Mid-40s, calm, deliberate, the kind of man who didn't waste words. I explained my family, how borrowing meant never seeing it again, how helping manage meant seizing control. Damon leaned back, eyes steady. "If you want this locked tight," he said, "an irrevocable trust is the way. Once it's created, not even you can pull the assets back under your name. They'll be outside public reach, and you'll remain sole trustee. It sounded severe, maybe even cold. But finality was exactly what I needed. Over the next 3 weeks, we buried the estate in paperwork and protection. An LLC under the trust's ownership took title to the Harbor Bay house. Utilities, taxes, insurance shifted into the entity's name. Investment accounts closed, funds redirected into secure holdings with dual authentication. Only Damon and I had control. The paper trail in Maine vanished. Originals locked in his office safe, duplicates tucked into a deposit box in Boston. I told no one. Not even my closest friends. The fewer threads, the less my family could tug. Some nights, alone in my apartment, I questioned myself. Was I being ruthless, cutting them out before they'd even asked? This kind of severing couldn't be undone. But then I'd remember the birthdays shrugged off, the milestones skipped, the tuition checks that never came. And I realized, coldness wasn't cruelty. Coldness was survival. By the time Elliot confirmed the estate was officially mine, the locks were in place. All I had to do now was wait. And wait, I did. The first signs came softly, almost rehearsed. A text from Belle, saw you in Harbor Bay last weekend, maybe I'll stop by. We should catch up. A call from my mother, voice syrupy, asking about my plans for the house. Then my father in the driveway with a toolbox, offering to fix the porch railing for free. I declined. Belle pressed harder. Dropping by with flowers or cookies, smiling as she drifted from room to room. Do you keep the deed here? I've never seen it, casual words that weren't casual at all. At a family dinner, my mother lectured about keeping property in the family, eyeing me with expectation. Belle chimed in about how she adored the estate, how she could picture herself renovating, even living there. I nodded politely, offering nothing. Every call, every visit was pressure, gentle but insistent, probing for weakness. They thought I was still the girl who'd cave to keep peace. But I let them believe that, answering with vague hums, never revealing how tightly the walls were sealed. Patience is a game, and they weren't the only ones playing. Then came the morning when their patience wore into boldness. I was sweeping leaves from the porch, the ocean restless behind me, when a sleek black SUV crunched up the gravel drive. Belle emerged first, hair neat, smile triumphant. My parents followed, my mother clutching a folder, my father walking slow and deliberate, projecting authority. Morning, Ro, Belle called. Then, without pause, this house is mine now. Mom and Dad think it's best if you move out this week. I already have a buyer interested. I stood still. Really? My father pulled papers from the folder, holding them out like an offering. There was a mistake in your grandparents' will. Technically, the estate should have been split between you and Belle. We worked with a lawyer to correct it, and the title is now in her name, so it'll be simpler to manage. The pages looked convincing, signatures, seals, official stamps. Almost. But my eyes caught the detail instantly. The seal's design was wrong. And that was all I needed to know. The notary stamp was missing digits, the signatures uneven, hesitant, like someone imitating confidence. Belle's grin stretched wide, polished, the way a realtor beams before sealing a sale. Don't worry. I'll take care of everything. Movers can be here in a week. I let silence linger, taking in the certainty written across their faces, cataloging every flaw, the wrong watermark, the notary's unfamiliar name, the date that didn't align. Finally, I said evenly, I hear you. Then I stepped aside, letting them believe they'd succeeded. They left looking pleased. I stayed on the porch, watching the SUV vanish, already certain their next move was close. 2 days later, earlier than expected, tires crunched over gravel. A moving truck pulled in first, the familiar black SUV right behind. Belle leapt out, tracksuit perfect, phone clutched tight, her expression alight with triumph. My parents followed, my mother already gesturing toward the porch, my father wearing that controlled half-smile he used when pretending authority. But I wasn't alone. Behind me stood Mark Ellery from the county records office's navy suit pressed, leather folder tucked neatly under his arm. We'd spoken the night before, he'd reviewed every trust document and agreed to stand with me here. He waited quietly as I folded my arms. The movers slowed as soon as they noticed the standoff. My father pressed forward, waving papers, but Mark stepped ahead, opening his folder to reveal a stamped county document. His voice carried clear. Mr. and Mrs. Mercer, Ms. Belle Mercer. As of April, this property was placed in an irrevocable trust with Ms. Clare Mercer as sole trustee. Any attempted transfer after that date is invalid and may be considered fraud. Belle's eyes flickered. Fraud? We corrected a mistake in the will. Mark didn't bother to look at her. Records confirm your filing used an unlicensed notary and came through an out-of-state service flagged for fraud. This is an official warning. Any further attempts will be referred for investigation. The movers exchanged glances and quietly retreated to their truck. My mother's jaw locked tight. My father folded his papers slowly before stalking back to the SUV. Belle lingered, face hardening. You'll regret this, she muttered. I said nothing. I didn't need to. When the engines finally faded, Mark handed me my copy of the notice. His gaze was steady. They won't let this go. Neither would I, and I knew the silence that followed was temporary. 3 mornings later, I found a thick envelope jammed into my mailbox. The return address, a Portland law firm. The sender's name, my mother. Sylvia Mercer. Inside, 4 polished pages laid out their demands: $150,000 in cash, joint ownership of the Harbor Bay property with Belle, and a monthly stipend for the well-being of the family. They accused me of damaging maternal and sibling ties by keeping the estate to myself. I read the letter twice, then called Selena Voss, an estate attorney recommended by a colleague. Her office walls were lined with framed case victories. She listened as I recounted everything: the forged papers, the staged takeover, the letter. Her answer was direct: we send a cease and desist. And we dig until we know exactly who filed those documents. Within 2 days, her letter was delivered to both my mother's attorney and her home. It cited the trust protections, warned against harassment, and threatened legal action for further attempts. Selena's investigator worked quickly. The forged transfer traced back to a property filing service notorious for fraudulent cases. The name attached, Belle Mercer. The notary number? Non-existent. Seeing it in writing lit a cold, steady anger in me. Mark's warning had been generous. They could have stopped. Instead, they doubled down. I left Selena's office with the report in my bag, though I already knew it wouldn't end there. The next strike came from another angle. A text from my cousin Maris: you need to hear this. She sent an audio file. My mother's voice filled my kitchen. Calm, deliberate. I don't want to speak poorly of her, but Clare manipulated Dad when he was vulnerable. Everyone knows he wasn't clear-minded when he signed those papers. Then came screenshots of group chats, my mother weaving the same lies, Belle chiming in about fairness, relatives speculating, painting me as the manipulator. I sent everything to Selena. Her response was sharp. They're building a smear campaign. If you stay silent, the narrative sticks. We go public, with proof. 2 days later, we had a 12-page statement ready. Every date, every signature, every filing. The trust records. The fraudulent trail tied to Belle. The county's official documentation. I sent it to every family member my mother had poisoned with lies. Subject line: the full truth. Apologies trickled in within hours. Some short, some long, many admitting how convincing my mother had sounded. A few relatives still clung to her version. But the tide shifted. Their story no longer stood unchallenged. Days later, news spread of Belle's new job, luxury real estate, a firm selling itself on integrity. I wasted no time. Selena and I packaged every document, fraud filings, invalid notary seal, county warnings, and sent them to the firm's ethics office. 3 days later, Belle was fired. The case forwarded to the licensing board. Her retaliation came fast. She hired a lawyer known for PR spin, framing me as vindictive, sabotaging her career. A blog picked up the story. Selena countered with certified evidence, the cease and desist, the fraud investigation, county statements. The licensing board acknowledged everything for the record. The noise died down. 2 months later, I received a plain white envelope. A Salem law firm. Inside, a single page, all claims withdrawn. No further contact permitted except through legal necessity. I folded it carefully into my file. No celebration, no gloating. Just the certainty that one battle had ended. That weekend, I drove to Harbor Bay. The gravel road curved toward the house, autumn leaves blazing, the sea a sheet of silver. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old wood and lavender. I wandered through each room slowly, touching the brick walls, the worn armchair, the framed photographs. My grandfather's words echoed softly in memory, protect what's worth keeping. Now I understood. It wasn't just the property. It was my peace, my dignity, my right to decide who had access to me. On the porch, I stood facing the horizon until the light thinned. The house was safe. The choice of which doors stayed closed, that was mine now.